Coming off an impressive run with Purdue in the 2024 NCAA tournament, Zach Edey had all the hype going into the NBA draft. At 7'4" and over 300 pounds, he's a big center who understands how to use his size and physicality to be a great two-way player. So then how come the modern era doesn't have more players like him? Did teams miss out by leaving him as the 9th overall pick in the draft? So just how good is Zach Edey? Zach Edey is one of the largest players in the NBA today in terms of size, making him a solid center who could dominate down in the low post. But that's also a reason why a lot of fans and GMs doubt he would be a big star in today's league that favors the perimeter. Still, that doesn't take away the fact that Edey has been playing extremely well and putting up great numbers in his rookie season. And with him playing like a young Yao Ming, a lot of fans are quite high on him and his upside. To understand how it all started, we have to start in Canada. Zach Edey was born and raised in Canada. His father, Glenn Edey, has a love for baseball and is an assistant coach of a youth baseball league. His mother, who's 6'3", is the daughter of Chinese immigrants, and she grew up in Toronto and had a love for basketball. But instead of focusing on basketball early on, Zach played baseball and ice hockey, because those were the sports his father loved. Of course, basketball wasn't as big in Canada as it is today. He only started taking basketball seriously when he reached the 10th grade, and that was because he was bigger and taller than everyone he played with. This made it easier for him to dominate and get the attention of different scouts. When it became clear that he was destined to be a basketball player, he transferred to Florida's IMG Academy, one of the best basketball programs in the United States. The problem with Edey's early beginnings in basketball, however, was his lack of skill and mobility. He may have been a huge kid, but he needed time and experience to develop. IMG, of course, saw the potential in him and had him work daily with Daniel Santiago, a former NBA center, to develop his skills as a 7-footer. One of the things that Santiago made Edey understand was to focus on playing like a center at his size. Santiago had worked with other unsuccessful 7-footers who thought they could play like guards. That's why he told Edey to be a big man and focus on playing like a big man, instead of trying to be someone he wasn't. So the young man developed into a classic low post center, a guy you could just dump the ball to on the low post, where he's allowed to work his way to efficient baskets, and his improvements allowed him to get more minutes with IMG. Edey was only a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, but he got offers from good programs like Baylor and Santa Clara. He ultimately chose Purdue, who said he joined the program because the school had a good reputation in developing centers who were never the most mobile or athletically big men. For example, former NBA All-Star Brad Miller. But Edey's journey through college basketball was a slow process. He couldn't just leave Purdue after his freshman and sophomore seasons because he just wasn't ready. Edey showed signs of promise as he was putting up efficient baskets in limited minutes, but the consensus was that he was still not polished enough to get to the NBA or become the anchor of a Purdue team wanting to win an NCAA title. After his sophomore season, Edey averaged over 14 points and nearly 8 rebounds while playing an average of 19 minutes. But a year later, he turned into the literal center of Purdue's offense. He completely dominated the Big Ten, putting up huge numbers by throwing his weight around the paint. As a junior, he averaged more than 22 points, close to 13 rebounds, and over 2 blocks while shooting over 60% from the field. Purdue's offense was simple: give Edey the ball inside the paint and let the big man work. Edey went on to sweep all the Player of the Year awards, becoming the best and most dominant player in college basketball. There was no other player who had the same impact and numbers he was putting up. But for some reason, Edey still felt he wasn't ready for the NBA just yet. With only one more season left in college, he wanted to make the most of his stay at Purdue, dreaming of bringing a championship to the program. Zach Edey had the run of a lifetime during his senior year. He willed the Purdue Boilermakers throughout the 2024 NCAA tournament, using his size to dominate smaller front lines. He wasn't scoring, he was putting pressure on opposing teams by fouling out their big men. But there was no stopping him around the paint. Edey averaged close to 30 points and nearly 15 rebounds while shooting over 64% from the field throughout the NCAA tournament as he led the Boilermakers to the NCAA finals. His best performance was when he dropped 40 points on Tennessee in the Elite Eight. And while the Boilermakers failed to win a title, Edey scored 37 of Purdue's 60 points against UConn in the championship game. He was a one-man wrecking crew, dominating the 7-2 Donovan Clingan in an epic battle between giants. That performance against the Huskies proved one thing. Edey wasn't simply dominating college basketball because he was bigger than everyone else in the country, but the fact that he was treating Clingan like a child was proof of his talent and improved low-post skills. By the end of his final college season, he once again swept all the Player of the Year awards, cementing his status as college basketball's best player once more. And with his college career done, the only destination left was the NBA. Truth be told, Edey could have left college a year earlier to join the NBA 2023 draft. However, staying in college for one more season was a great decision. The 2023 draft class was deep, with Victor Wembanyama as the headliner, but the 2024 class was set to be weaker in terms of talent. While Edey wasn't someone you'd consider a weak player, joining the class of 2024 while his stock was at its highest gave him a good chance of becoming a lottery pick. But you might be wondering why he wasn't even considered one of the top draft picks despite his dominant collegiate run. The NBA played an entirely different style that emphasized perimeter scoring. Most centers in the NBA can shoot three-pointers or have guard-like skills. Other teams focus more on playing smaller but agile centers who could keep up with guards and switches and pick-and-roll situations. That's why the league doesn't have a lot of old-school centers who camp in the paint. There are only two true standout centers in the NBA, and we're looking at Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid. Jokic is an anomaly because even though he doesn't have the speed and athleticism to keep up with smaller players, he's so skilled that his defensive weaknesses get canceled by his offensive production. Meanwhile, Embiid dominates like a true center, but he also has enough mobility to keep up with smaller players. Players like Ivica Zubac and Jonas Valanciunas, two centers people often compare Zach Edey to, may get consistent minutes in the NBA but are deemed too slow to keep up with guards. As the great Charles Barkley said, it's difficult to evaluate Edey today compared to 15 years ago, because he needs centers who can defend the perimeter or shoot three-pointers to stretch the floor.
15 years ago, he would have been a lot easier to evaluate, but the way the league is today, we only got two centers in the NBA, Joker and Embiid. He can play, but how is he gonna factor in against these stretch fours?
As dominant as Edey was in college, he played a classic style that required him to camp in the lane on offense and defense. He could push around smaller NBA centers or shoot over them because he's still 7'4" and over 300 pounds. You could just throw the ball to him, and he's going to find a way to force that thing into the hoop. The problem is that not a lot of coaches thought he could be a factor in a league that wants its centers to stretch the floor, or at the very least be mobile enough to keep up with smaller and quicker players. Despite any doubts about his ability to translate his dominant college career into the NBA, Edey got chosen 9th overall by the Memphis Grizzlies in the 2024 draft pick, and that's when he slowly worked on his game to earn consistent minutes as a lottery pick. The Memphis Grizzlies pegged Edey as their starting center. Now if you look at this team, it's a great fit for someone like Edey. The Grizzlies have Ja Morant, a willing passer at the point guard spot, and their other players like Desmond Bane and Jalen Wells are also great at stretching the field, because this team has a ton of shooters who can light it up from deep. A pick and roll with Ja and Edey is a dangerous sight to look at, especially with shooters spreading the floor. That's why he's been playing incredibly well for the Grizzlies. Edey's been using his height, length, and size to finish over every defender whenever he's in the paint. In his 8th game as professional, he finished with 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 blocks, while making 11 of the 12 shots he attempted. The most surprising part of his game was his shooting. It's clear that Edey worked on his outside shot over the summer. In Purdue, he only got 2 three-pointers his entire career, making only 1 outside jumper. But with the Grizzlies, he's been shooting more and is willing to shoot a 3-point shot when he's open. That means he knows he needs to add a new dimension to his game if he wants to have a long and successful NBA career in today's day and age. Sure, he can score and dominate in the NBA, especially when he's plugged into a system that knows how to take advantage of his size. But his defensive weaknesses are still a huge question mark. How long can you keep Edey on the floor when opposing teams force him to switch onto point guards? For now, in a way, he's more like a younger Boban Marjanovic at this point in his career. While Marjanovic did have a good NBA career, he barely played more than 10 minutes a game because of his defensive weaknesses. This will make you wonder whether Edey is destined to be the next giant who can score but is far too slow, or if he could actually be a consistent rotation player. But if Edey wants to be a main factor in the league, the best example to look at is Brook Lopez, who was never the fastest and most athletic center. Lopez, however, changed his game and turned into a stretch big man who can shoot three-pointers at a high rate. On the other hand, he mastered the art of the drop coverage, where he focuses on dropping down to the paint instead of switching during pick-and-roll situations. Lopez's evolution helped the Milwaukee Bucks win a title in 2021, but he's also considered one of the best defensive centers in the league. Zach Edey could use Brook Lopez as a case study by working on his three-point shooting and focusing more on using his size and length as a defensive deterrent inside the paint. If he can master both ends of the floor, he has a great chance of becoming an NBA All-Star. So, do you think Zach Edey is worth the hype? Do you think he'll be the next great big man in the league? Leave a comment down below. Love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.